me tell you, we have a special treat, a special treat. When I tell you that Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley is one of the premier speakers in my life, and dear mentor of mine. I appreciate him so very much for all that he pours into my life. I'm always astonished whenever my phone rings and it's his name that I see on it, because I deem myself unworthy to be in the likes of people like Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley. I'm gonna let Kyle read off his bio for you, and then we'll turn it over to Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley to go from there.
Well, Dr. Durley's bio is much more impressive than this, but here's the Reader's Digest condensed version. The Reverend Dr. Gerald L. Durley's long and distinguished career began as a student leader in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Upon earning a degree in psychology, Dr. Durley became one of the first U.S. Peace Corps volunteers to serve in Nigeria. He also holds a Master of Science degree in community mental health / psychology from Northern Illinois University and a doctorate degree in urban education and psychology from the University of Massachusetts. Dr. Durley has been a program manager in the U.S. Department of Education, dean at Clark College, and a program administrator at Morehouse School of Medicine, both in Atlanta. Reverend Dr. Durley also was a pulpit associate at Mount Olive Baptist Church in Washington, D.C., and at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. After 25 years of service, he retired as the pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church and is currently the pastor emeritus. While serving as pastor, he became intensely involved in climate change, global warming, and environmental justice. Reverend Dr. Durley now combines the disciplines of faith and science with the lessons learned as a civil and human rights advocate from the 1960s. Welcome, Dr. Durley.
Thank you so much, Kyle, for that very, very warm introduction. I really appreciate it because you read it just the way I wrote it. And I wanted them to know all about who I was. First of all, let me say good morning to all of my friends, co-laborers, co-warriors, trench workers, and justice seekers. Let me thank the People's Justice Council, the Southeast Faith Leaders Network, and the Southeast Conference of the United Church of Christ. This is a very special moment for me today. And whenever my dear friend and colleague, the Reverend Michael Malcolm calls, I can't do anything but to respond. And when he called and asked me to share an idea or a thought or two with those of us on the line, I was a little hesitant. I was a little wondering, could I do it because of all of the expertise that all of you have. I realized when I looked over all of your bios that all of you had a PhD, and that made me a little nervous. Now, some of you just said, I don't have a PhD. Yes, you do, because a PhD only stands for what you do. PhD, professionally handling demands, and that's what you do every day. In your day-to-day challenges, you professionally handle what's been assigned unto your hands to do. So I'm honored and just really thankful to be here this morning. And when he told me the topic, Energizing the South for Justice, the title of that conference in the summit baffled me. I said it over again, Energizing the South for Justice. It was a little troubling for me because I entered the whole area of environmental justice and environmental movement a little over 9 years ago. And when I entered, I was not that excited about it. It was something to do. Somebody asked me to come to a meeting, and not knowing how to say no, I begrudgingly went to the meeting. And when I listened to all of the talk about climate change, global warming, carbon dioxide, I was not really energized nor excited. But 9 years later, after understanding all of the things that have occurred around the world, I am more energized than ever. So when he said we want to energize the South for justice, I said, what? People are coming to this place energized already. Our job might be to calm them down and slow them down. But when I began to realize and began to understand that climate change and all of its ravaging impact upon all human, animal, plant, and insect life and water, I got so excited. This environmental movement in my mind primarily I thought, well, why should I get involved with it? I'm a black man who's been on the battlefield for civil and human rights. Why would I get involved with something that is so far removed from my community, from those that I'm called to serve? I thought that those that were involved, they had more time on their hand. They had the financial resources to sit under trees and hike in the forest and go scuba diver at will, look at the marvelous, beautiful coral reefs, and then come back and sit around the table and talk about the grandeur of the marine life. I wondered, how could these people waste or invest so much time, their precious time, in studying the weather calamities? After all, what was happening was going to be 2-3 centuries away from now, or 50 years, I'll be dead, so why should I really get involved? I needed to be concerned about the issues that directly impacted those around me. I questioned the legitimacy and their inclinations to come together and hold workshops, seminars, lectures, and now crowding on a phone, a webinar phone, Zoom, that half of us don't know how to operate who are over 50, and we're pushing buttons here and there, but we're still in there. And I said, what is all of this about? It's just too far for me to understand. Oh, they could find the luxury. Let's go to Greenland and see how the melting is going. Let's go to the Arctic Circle. Let's go to the deserts of Africa. And I said, all that's going on in America, all of the tragedies that we face here in this country, how can they have the luxury or take the luxury to talk about climate change and all of its devastation? What did it mean to me if a few polar bears could not get to the next ice glacier? Was it devastating that the glaciers were melting at an alarming rate? Why should I be overly concerned or even remotely concerned about the increasing series of more unusual hot weather, earthquakes that are rattling right beneath our feet? Why should I get involved when Richter scales are setting new records, terrifying tornadoes, horrendous hurricanes, drying out droughts, wind-filled wildfires, and rivers that were so disobedient that they were overpowering their assigned banks? These were merely the normal cycles of life. So why should I concern myself with environmental changes, which I had little or no control over? After all, we've all learned that's just Mother Nature. We had nothing to do with that. There are cycles, and we need to understand that there's summer, winter, spring, and fall. So I resolved myself to understand that I will not get involved with these people. They have that luxury. They have the privilege of doing this. So myself and others in my community, I looked at it somewhat askance. But then I began to realize that those who were involved, it gave them a certain meaningful purpose, a raison d'etre, something to keep them coming together and sharing these stories. So I got involved, but every time I came to a meeting, I became more and much more disenchanted. Disenchanted because all I heard was doom and gloom stories. Maybe that's why we need a summit to energize us, because all around us we hear about all the cataclysmic weather calamities that are destroying life and destroying the planet and destroying our crops. So I said, no, I cannot be around this group of people. There's enough tragedy in my life, so I don't need to come to hear a bunch of people talk about the environment. As an African American, I felt understandably excluded from the emerging concern about the environment. My environment was speaking to justice issues. My environment was, how do you change an unfair judicial system? How do you limit the no access to quality education and infant child care, infant child death, mortality rates, unequal education? Those were justice issues that I could make a difference in, not something like the climate. I was concerned about limited non-employment for first-line service workers. How did I get into it? What could I do to eliminate this foreboding issue all around this country called institutionalized racism, systemic racism? These concerns occupied my daily challenge. Not the climate, not pollution, not fossil burning fuel. I was a civil rights fighter. When I think about it now, just like in your own life, there are times that there are issues that come in that change your life. I joined up with Dr. King and Andy Young, Ralph David Abernathy, my good friend John Lewis, C.T. Vivian, Bernard Lafayette, Fannie Lou Hamer in Nashville, Tennessee, at Tennessee State, where I led the students. I had no idea that I would get involved deeply involved in the civil rights movement for justice, for ethics, and for morality. Mine was simply to go down there and march. I thought there are times in all of our lives where we think we're just coming to a summit, where we think we're just getting on a call, but somebody says something. There is something that gets into your spirit that makes you say, wait a minute, there is something to this and I must get involved. That happened to me in the civil rights movement. So I was around people who define my purpose, those who fight for civil rights and human rights and constitutional rights for all Americans. When you believe in something so strongly, you don't have to be energized. You energize those that are around you. So I began to march for justice. We were marching for constitutional rights, simply for one word that we're talking about in this summit: justice, fairness, and equality. Of course, at that time, we were marching for a fair and equal justice system to give us our own inalienable rights. But here we are in October of 2020. How could I have ever imagined? How could I have ever imagined from 1960 to 2020, 60 years, that the same issues of fairness and equity and justice would prevail and divide this nation? We call divide this nation. Can you imagine? We're divided right and left and blue and red and tall and short and gay and lesbian and black and white and Latino. And yet we have the nerve to say we're the United States of America. That's why this summit title was so revealing to me. We come to energize the South for justice. We came here already. Something down inside of you say somebody will say something to complement what I already feel. And iron sharpens iron, as it says in the Bible. And once you say something and I say something, then we become a team for justice. I'm here to acknowledge the fact that America has abandoned its moral, ethical high ground in world leadership on all fronts. That statement alone, when we realize how we've fallen deeper into this chasm of just not caring, of greed, of avarice, of insensitivity to others and to our environment, that alone should be enough for you to say, my co-leaders or co-laborers and warriors, that should energize you enough to want to stay and fight. We have convened at this summit to energize us to become even more involved in this movement. Watch this. I'm going to use a term, and it just came to me because most of us are involved in trying to get people to vote, trying to ensure that the vote will reign supreme, that democracy will once again rear its head and we can come back to some semblance of sanity in this country. So when I listen to all the people and the word that they're saying now is something that we said in 1960, it's interesting how things go around. I heard Joe Biden and even Kamala repeat it. We're here to save the soul of America. And that word began to register to me because before I rewired from Providence, not retired, but rewired from Providence, I was always talking about the soul and what the soul meant. And I look, the soul is the uniting of the spirit and the body. That's what the soul does. And right now, we're in a battle for the soul of the planet, the soul of the environment, the thing that holds it all together. The spirit is not invisible, but the energy which gives life to the body and allows the body to move and choose and make decisions. The soul of any organism, and particularly the soul of you and I, it allows us to understand what the essence of living is about. It gives us our mental abilities, the ability to reason, our character, our feelings, our consciousness, even our memory, perceptions, and thinking. The soul is at the center of all of our very existence. During the civil rights movement, we were fighting for the soul of America, to make America good on that promissory note that all would be equal, but the check came back with insufficient funds. The soul for us was human rights and civil rights. But I contend, listen to me, my friends and co-laborers and co-warriors today, the soul of America now is the environment. And we have an obligation, a moral obligation to save the soul of America. And if the soul is an environment, then we have to be energized to save the soul, which is the environment of today. The environment is the very soul of our existence. It is a constitutional, God-given sanction right for all to move, to have clean water, toxic-free air, waste dumps not in our own neighborhood of color, a carbon-free environment, It is a constitutional right that they need to stop fossil burning fuel, and we need to re-legislate motor vehicles emissions across. But remember this, if the soul of a nation, which I'm calling the environment, is polluted and poisoned, so poisoned that it cannot provide what humans, animals, and plants need, let me say this, then it all dies. What good is it for me to have political power? What good is it for me to have a large corporation? What does it profit me if I gain all these accoutrements and I die because I can't breathe? I die because the water is so terrible that I can't drink it. What good is it? I'm not being melodramatic here this morning. The movement to mitigate the climate crisis is the new civil rights movement of our day. Profits over people have created what Dr. Ben Chavis said when he was fighting in North Carolina many years ago. He labeled it environmental racism. So now we must join forces all together, Black and white and Jew and Christian, and all of us coming together to fight for eco-justice. When I think about the justice issues all around, when I think about St. James, the Baptist parish down in Louisiana, where this was a community, and when the major plants came in, they began to put power plants all around them. This small community, 85-mile tract where they came in and literally destroyed that community, mainly people of color, where the diseases came in and the water became so sickening that they began to die with premature birth. So when it comes to the equality, we talk so much about we've got to do something about the disproportionate nature of what we're doing to communities of color and rural areas. We talk a good game, but are we really going in there? Have we included these individuals in our discussion so that we can get the inside track on what needs to be done? One of the things that I learned as a community organizer is that I didn't know what I thought I knew when I thought I knew where I was going, but I didn't know where I was going because when I got there, I knew that I didn't know. So I had to ask somebody how to bring the people all around to understand what the justice looks like. We can no longer talk about a cancer island. Or when we look at the coal ash pits up in Virginia and other places where the waste from the coal is just destroying communities, primarily in communities of color. Several years ago, I had the privilege of being with Waterkeepers, and we went into Eastern North Carolina, and we talked about the atrocities that these companies were doing when they were having the hog growers and those that were growing hogs just to put in open pits, put all the innards and the feces into these open pits, and then they would spray water on them. And all of that would sink into the subterranean level of the soil. It poisoned the water. The stench was unbearable. And all of these communities, primarily communities of color there in Eastern North Carolina. Why? Because they could get land at a lower rate. And they did not have any regard for the people that were there. It was profits over people. That's why we're on this call now, to be energized, not to be energized so that we can go back and say, guess what we were, guess who we met, guess what we said, guess what we did. We don't do anything unless we're energized to go back and get involved, to get rid of those coal ash dumps, to get rid of toxic waste dumps in these neighborhoods, and all of these kinds of things, to cut back on the asthma and the cancer rates in so many of these communities, and work with people through their public service commission to lower these energy costs. There's an estimate that says in 2030, if we don't do something, the estimated cost will be for healthcare will be 55 billion to 93 billion. If we don't do something, premature deaths will go from 2,700 to 6,600 premier deaths a year. If we don't do something by 2030, this is 2020, I'm talking 10 years from now, 140,000 to 150,000 asthma victims will occur. We'll see food deserts, loss of property and income will be staggering. Those of us at this summit, we've got to do something. A word just hit me. I'm going to make up a phrase. Probably nobody's ever heard it. I believe we've got to get into good trouble. I just made that up. Good trouble. That's a word I think I like that word. I'm going to use from good. We've got to get involved in good trouble. John Lewis, who could not go to Troy State, but came to Nashville in 1960. He couldn't go to Troy State because of the racism that if he went to that all-white school, they might burn his mother and father's house down. So he made a change. Sometimes in our lives, we want to go one direction, but God has another place for us to go. And if we're obedient to the calling that God has and understanding the visceral nature that we've got to do something, God will bless your ministry. God will bless your mission and your purpose so that you become very important and you'll energize yourself and no one else will energize you. I've often said, if everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. Be energized, be enthusiastic, which means being in theos or in God. John Lewis had to go to the Nashville Baptist Institute, but when he got there, he met Jim Lawson, he met other people, and here we were at lunch counters. We began to understand the more that came to us, the more energized we were. Why? Because our cause was right. To mitigate against this climate change, the travesty against what these companies are doing to us as a people and to our plants and to our animals and specifically to our pollinating bees, we've got to be energized to stay in the fracas. We've got to go back and re-energize and get the clean power plan back into existence. We've got to get ready for this new administration that will be coming in a couple of weeks. Oh, I can't wait. I'm energized about that. That when they come in, that the Paris Agreement will be reestablished, that all of those laws that reversed on legislation around car emission will be turned around. The three words that kept us going and energized during that time, and even today, we were organized, we strategized, and now we're mobilizing. This is a key point. And inside of each one of us, two words must be real. One, we've got to be willing to sacrifice, and two, we've got to be able to risk. Without sacrifice and risk, there is no movement. Mere fact that you're at this summit says that I'm ready. Here am I, send me. I heard that somewhere in antiquity. Here am I, send me. Are you willing to step up when others have stepped out? Are you willing to understand the propensities that can occur around you when you step out? We've got to come together across all kinds of lines and stand as a team of one. I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been before in the last 50 or 60 years, because only a few weeks ago, I saw young blacks and young whites and Jews and others coming together across the world, but specifically here in America, coming together to speak up for justice. When justice rolls down like a mighty force, then we can understand how we can all win in this area. We've got to understand right now, as we face this new administration, we need to be the first in line, talking to Biden and talking to Harris. Somebody said, wait, the election hasn't occurred. Yes, the election has occurred. Some people are saying, I hope we win. I claim we win. And when you claim in the name of a deity that's greater than yourself, get ready, get out your dancing shoes. When this new administration comes in, we cannot say, well, we made it, and then we sit down. No, our job begins. I've often said the real work of those in the church starts after the benediction. Some people do the benediction. They say, I'll wait till next week to come back. No, the benediction for this administration will be November the 3rd. But the next administration is when we get in, and we will be energized. We've got to hold the energy companies accountable, the power moguls accountable, the EPA lackeys. We got to give them some more backbone. We've got to get hold to the power-hungry politician. And yes, there's another group we've got to hold accountable to make sure that we stay on track. That's us, the conservation groups, the energy groups, the water groups, the air group. We cannot afford to be all discombobulated in a lot of silos, because all the dots are connected. Air, water, business, politics, health, education, it's all one. Now, we might have different roles, but we're all on the same team. Everybody can't be a quarterback and or tackle. But when we put it all together, we can win. We've got to hold all of them accountable. Yes, I was in the civil rights movement, and now the civil rights movement and the climate movement, we've joined together, and we present a moral, ethical justice movement, fighting for the soul of America and the soul which gives life to the planet, the environment. Some quotes from Martin Luther King. Martin said, I quote, our life begins to end the day we become silent about things that matter. He goes on to say, we must build dikes of courage to hold back the floods of fear. Martin would always add and encourage, The word courage means heart. So now what this is doing today and the next day and tomorrow and all of the speakers and all of your involvement, we're sharpening iron. We're not here to come in and talk about all the gloom and doom. We can do that. We can watch television and get enough doom and gloom and enough stories. What we've got to do is come in and look each other in the eye, look at one another in the eye and say that we are going to win. We're coming through this together because justice is on our side. Morality is on our side. Ethical decision-making is on our side. And most of all, regardless of your religion, whether it's Allah, Jehovah, God, whoever it might be, is on our side. This is our time now. Martin said this is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. My wise leader once said, and this is why our energy is so important today, now is the time to rise up from the dark and desolate valley of ignorance and fear to the sunlight of racial and economic justice and equality. We can no longer, church folks, we can no longer believe in miracles. We must rely on them. So I say to you today, the next several days, be involved, be excited, be re-energized. Somebody said, Durley, you're a great motivational speaker. No, I'm not a motivational speaker. I tried for years to motivate my son to pull up his pants. It never worked. But what you and I are, we're inspirational speakers. Inspire, breathe something into one another. You into me into you. And when we're inspired, nothing can turn us around. There's a song in the Christian tradition that some of you might know. It's called, and I've seen people get up and shout and sing, I am on the battlefield. And they would sing, I'm on the battlefield for my Lord. And they'd just be singing. And folks get happy and get excited. But I'll tell you what I'm looking for. And I hope that the people that I'm looking for are at this summit. The people that I'm looking for are not merely on the battlefield, but they are in the battle. It's easy to be on the battlefield. But when you're in the battle, it is tumultuous, it is tiring, it is wearisome. But be ye not weary in well doing, for you will reap in due season. And this is due season. This is our season now. We will not back up. We will not bend. You are in the battle, not on the battlefield. And we're going to get deeper in the battle, but we come together to go into a huddle, if you will, and get our playbook right, get our strategy right, get our minds right, and get our souls right so that we can be the soul-saving grace for the environment, because the environment is around all of us. I'm so excited. I'm so energized. And I'm so thankful for the Justice people in the United Church of Christ and my good friend, Malcolm, who allowed me to come and share. Oh, do I get excited? Do I look excited? I'm 79 years old. I ought to be somewhere sitting down. They said, are you retired? I said, no. I'm rewired. And in rewirement, wherever you are along the chronological stage of your life, understand that you are significant and you are important. We know all of the statistics. You all know the statistics. You got all of the books. You've seen all of the devastation. Now let's go back to what am I willing to risk and what am I willing to sacrifice? So stay and remember one thing. I always close off all of my meetings by saying simply this. Remember this. We are on the winning team. I don't like to get on losing team. We're on the winning team. And if you're on the winning team, you can only be on the winning team when we lock arms and stand together and pray together and sing together and shout together and march together. And if necessary, go to jail together. That's where I am. So thank you so much, my good friend, Malcolm. Thank you so much, United Church. Are you ready to get out and march? Are you ready to get up and stand? Remember this, don't bend, don't break, don't bow down, and don't back up. This is our time. This is a Kairos moment designed for all of us. And boy, when that new administration gets in there, I hope I'm not insulting anyone. And when that new administration gets in there, we're going to get up and we're going to march and we are going to do what God told us to do. We are going to be caretakers of what he entrusted into our lives. In Genesis, he said, take care of my earth. We're going to do it. Bye.